Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Amherst League of Women Voters. Used to be, and this is the last time I'm going to use this phrase, the brown bag conversation. And it has been changed to the Judy Brooks conversation series, and named after a very active community member and very active in the League of Women Voters for voting and all kinds of other things. And with permission of her family, we've been given permission to use her name for this because she would love this. And she would love to be hosting it or being here or doing whatever. So this, the first one where we're using the Judy Brooks name is Kevin Noonan, who is the executive director of Craig's Doors. And I'm not going to give a lot of background about that because Kevin's going to do that, I'm sure. Kevin is originally from Springfield. His bio is about 2.5 pages, so I'm just going to generally talk about it. But he has been all over the world, and in an effort to help people in many, many different ways. And we're just grateful that we have him here in the Amherst area, working with Craig's Doors and having worked for resettlement in places like East Asia and Southeast Asia, the Philippines, Japan, Vietnam, etc. He also has done refugee resettlement programs and people in Ethiopia trying to escape at one point. He's done a lot of things, and they're all pretty much related to helping people be settled, and etc. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the Executive Director of Craig's Doors here in Amherst, Kevin Noonan. Kevin?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Andrea. And I remember Judy. She was a very nice woman. How is Barry? Is he still in the area?
He is living in the same
He
home.
did give us, yeah, he gave us permission. He and his son
Oh, that's nice.
gave us permission to use the name because we went by to see him and asked if we could use her name that way.
Oh, that's very nice.
But it
He's a
was
real
appropriate.
gentleman. My daughters were very fond of him when they went to the middle school. And also, I used to listen to his radio program on WTCC, the Great Black Music, when I lived in Palmer before I even moved to Amherst 30 years ago, 35 years ago, maybe. It's what a nice man he is. And Judy was a wonderful person too. So sorry she's no longer with us. I'm not familiar with the format. So what would you like to know? And maybe I can focus on that first because I don't know everything anyway. So I see Andrea's talking, but I can't hear her.
Trying to be polite. First, I'd like to just explain what Craig's Doors is.
Sure.
Most people, a lot of people know, but a lot of people don't actually know. I found
Sure.
out.
So Craig's Doors was started in 2011, and it began, well, I was at Open Pantry in Springfield for 20 years, and I left in 2009. And Waylon Greene called me as soon as I left Craig's Open Pantry and said, "Oh, we need your help on the Committee to End Homelessness." And the Committee to End Homelessness was one that was set up by the town of Amherst after the Ken Mazakowski had appeared before the select board and asked people to, basically we need a shelter, because for about 30 years, there was shelter services in Northampton, but there was nothing in Amherst. So, and then Ken died after many, many years of advocacy. And of course, many of you remember his radio program on WMUA, Focus. And so this committee was established. So Whaling asked me to be on that committee. Jerry Weiss was also on that committee. Several others were on that committee. And they had an interest in a shelter. And they asked me, well, as someone who had run shelters in Springfield, can you help us? And I said, well, you need to involve the houses of worship. And they said, well, we've done that. We've written to them and they haven't written back. I said, well, you really need to go see them. And so I'm a member of the Unitarian Universalist Society of Amherst. So I went to my congregation first and asked them if they would do it. And I don't know if you recall, the UU has a nice new addition at the back of its meeting house But that wasn't there in 2009 when we're talking about 2009, before Craig Stores even existed. And they voted unanimously to let us do it. So we would have been sleeping upstairs in the sanctuary behind that beautiful stained glass angel. And we would have had to go downstairs, totally no ADA compliance whatsoever. We would have to go downstairs to two decrepit bathrooms, really. You had to kind of step up about that high to get into them. And it would have been miserable, to be honest with you. So as soon as we had that approval, they voted unanimously to do it. Wei-Ling and I went down to Mercy House, the old Methodist church on North Pleasant Street, and spoke to Reverend Robert Crumray and asked him, could we use his facility? We were with also Roy Rosenblatt, who was from the town, who was helping us try to identify a site. And the people at the Mercy House said, yeah, we would be interested. And, we let them know that the Unitarians were, interested and we're going to do it. And so we didn't know if that helped or not, but and after that meeting, we went out and we talked with Roy and we thought, oh, this is a much better site, but they still have some challenges. So then Wei-Ling asked me, well, should we go down to the Baptist church? And so we said, well, why not? So we went down. There was like a Goldilocks story, really. So we get to the Baptist church. It's like, whoa, this is just right. It's got bathrooms. It's got bathrooms on the same level. It's got a well-appointed kitchen, albeit old, but very nice, and a wide space in the undercrop of their church. So we negotiated with Jerry Gates and Reverend Greg Moselle, and it's kind of funny, after our meeting, we came out of the First Baptist Church. Wei-Ling says to me, well, what do you think? And I said, well, that pastor, maybe. That old guy, I don't think so. And I was dead wrong. Jerry Gates had been homeless when he was 8. His father had passed away and they lost the farm. And so they had to go from one house to the other in those days. He lived in rural Vermont, I think in the Putney area. So he made it happen. He was a developer and he transformed that space. Now, initially, when we got to the Baptist church, there were no sprinklers. So we had to say, well, how do we get around that? So we said, well, we'll just let them sit in chairs because that's safer than letting them freeze to death on the streets. So we let them sit in chairs, and chairs can be uncomfortable, especially these folding metal chairs. So we gave them a yoga mat to put over the chair, and well, for their backs, we gave them a pillow, and for to be warm, we gave them a blanket. And I don't know how these people figured it out, but they did. They took those 3 things and they put them on the floor, and they slept. So this went on fine. The police were in and out of there. They knew what we were doing. The town sort of ignored it. And then someone wrote a letter. Someone from the committee actually wrote a letter decrying the fact that they didn't have proper beds. And so all hell broke loose at that point, because now it's out in the public that we're running a shelter in a place without sprinklers. So luckily, we were able to get past that, again, with Jerry's help, and CHD stepped in. And we were able to get, with help from the Interfaith Council, Jim Lumley was on that. I'm trying to think of the Amherst College professor who was on that too. Anyway, they provided some money for us to put in sprinklers. We used to have to go down to Boston every 3 years to get permission from the State Fire Safety Commission to run a shelter in a partially sprinkled building once it was sprinkled. So I volunteered with CHD that first year, and it went well. But then there was like, I think there was $90,000 on the table to run this. So CHD wasn't inclined to continue because it was costing them more than they were able to get reimbursed. So the second year, a group called Milestone Ministries started running the shelter, but the same problem existed. And maybe there was 116 or 120,000 on the table at that point in CDBG funds. I believe by that time I guess it was still Larry Schaefer that was the town manager. And so they only lasted a season as well. And I volunteered for them as well. And there was a guy that came to the shelter. He used to spend his days over in Northampton, named Craig Lorraine. He was a Navy veteran, grew up in Chicopee, age 45. And he would his marimba out in front of Ted's Boots in Northampton. And then he would, because our philosophy is that we run a low barrier or low threshold shelter. We believe that, you know, being an alcoholic or a drug addict is not a death sentence. So we made sure that people were admitted as long as they behaved themselves. We're a behavior-based shelter. So as long as they behaved themselves, it didn't matter to us. And that's our staffing pattern too is set up so that we have 2 people on duty at all times. And our covenant with the people is that you sleep, we watch, and we do. And we have people, you know, in those days there was no Narcan available on a widespread basis, but now there is, and we make sure our staff have access to it and keep it on them whenever. And we've had several instances where we've had to use it. You know, people can take that either way, but to us, it's a miracle. Like we've had at least two cases where we didn't think the person was going to make it, but they did because of the fast action by the staff administering Narcan. So that was year two. So, oh yeah, and then Craig was over at the Noonan Center because the shelter at the Baptist Church is a very vibrant community, and they had many different programs. They had the food pantry, they had the International Mothers Group, they had ESL classes, they had half a dozen other, you know, and their own, and they also have a Korean church and a Chinese congregation, and so there wasn't a lot of time and space availability. So meanwhile, Jerry was also trying to make amazing things. Like there was a space between the old part of the building and the new part of the building. It was open to the sky. He enclosed that and put showers in there so that we were able to have hot showers for people. So but Craig was over at the Noonan Center because we couldn't open until 9:30 at night each night. And he was waiting at the Noonan Center, and he had fallen or had been hit in the head, or I don't know. And he suffered a cerebral bleed of some kind and died. And in fact, Gabe Ting, who's now a captain, remembers going to that call and trying to revive Craig at the Noonan Center. Anyway, we were very sad when Craig died, and Craig had once spoken to Laura Quinn, who was the previous executive director prior to me, and one of the founding board members as well, along with Jerry Weiss and myself and Jim Lumley. And he had told her one day he was having a bad day, and he just said, I wish I had a door I could close. And you don't think about that often. You don't think about the lack of agency. And maybe that's a kind of a buzzword, but you know, if you don't have a door, you can't close out the outside world. This was true going back to what we spoke briefly at the beginning. Somebody may have joined us later about Sanctuary City in Springfield, and that same phenomenon was there. People assembled first on the lawn of the Roman Catholic Cathedral and then behind our building at Open Pantry in this parking lot. There were 80 people living in about 42 tents. And they had that same ability to zip closed a door on a tent. And it didn't stop the noise, but you could do things like have a cat. You know what I mean? You could sleep until you didn't, you could just do whatever you wanted behind that piece of nylon. So Craig's message of I just wish I had a door sort of resonated with us. And we were already trying to start an organization to do permanent affordable housing, which was the intent. The irony is we haven't, in this town, it's very hard to do permanent affordable housing. So we haven't done that much. But with the Milestone Ministries saying that they didn't want to run the shelter the second year, there's a couple of reasons. One, there wasn't a lot of money. Secondly, they realized that they couldn't proselytize. They were a religious organization. With federal money, you can't do that. So, and I was working for them as an advisor, and I kept reminding them, you can't do that. You can talk to people if they want to ask you about your personal faith journey, but you can't proselytize. So they decided that this wasn't for them. They moved down to Palmer and opened up some other kind of shelter that's more faith-based. So the town asked Craig's Doors, which was just in its infancy at that time, in 2011, could you run the shelter next year? And so we did from 2011 until the pandemic hit at the Baptist Church, and it was strictly an overnight shelter. And the problem always was that people are on their feet all day, and then they can't come in until 9:30, and they got to be out at 8 o'clock in the morning. And then I think and again, I think I said this at the Amherst Club. And by the way, thank you for the generous donation folks sent to Craig Stores. The people who were on their feet all day then, would go and you'd see them all around town panhandling. And if you fast forward to today, where we have 24-hour operations for as many as 70 people, and we have doors for people to get behind, or at least, options to stay 24 hours a day. People are not having to carry their bags all around, and they're able to, sleep in. I mean, we might ask them to step outside if the weather's not inclement, so we can clean, but that's all. And so you don't see, in my opinion, you don't see as many people on the streets of Amherst as you used to. Or if you do, you don't notice that they're homeless because they're not carrying their belongings on their back. It's an easy way to identify people who are homeless, or a student, I suppose, but it's kind of easy to tell the difference usually. So after the pandemic hit, we weren't able to really stay in that same undercroft under the First Baptist Church. It was just too tight, and there was no cross ventilation. So we started looking around, and by then the UU had built in 2014 they had built a new addition. And of course, as soon as they did that and they had a commercial kitchen, we asked them, can we help sponsor a community breakfast every Wednesday, because that's the day that the Amherst Survival Center is not open. And the Not Bread Alone does serve an evening meal, but there's nothing during the day. So by doing that, we were able to cover Monday, 7 days a week, basically. The Survival Center did Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. We did Wednesday along with Not Bread Alone, and Not Bread Alone also serves Saturdays and Sundays. So in Amherst, I'm happy to say that you can get a meal every day of the week. And I'm actually very proud to be in a community that takes that seriously. And of course, the Not Bread Alone people and the Survival Center, they do a bang up job with the food. Not that there's anything wrong with the breakfast, but it's heartening. So we proposed to the UU again. Well, you're not using your meeting house because of COVID. Would you mind if we did? And so we had to jump through some hoops with smoke detection and not smoke detection, sorry, CO detection, carbon monoxide. And we were able to get permission to put 14 people in there. And we stayed right through the season at the UU. That would be 2020 through 2021. And we didn't close on April 30th, when we traditionally close. We stayed open through July. Simultaneous to that, because of the federal government's COVID money, they had what they called Emergency Shelter or Solutions Grant money, -CV for COVID. And so we were able to get access to those dollars. And simultaneous to opening at the UU, we were able to rent the entire University Lodge right at the base of the triangle of Kendrick Park. If you know, North Pleasant Street is the weirdest street in town, I think. It goes down through the center of town, takes a left, takes a right, takes a left, takes a right. And it's still called North Pleasant Street. In fact, all of our programs are on North Pleasant Street, 121, 236, 345, 434, and 867. Anyway, so we were able to house 20 people there and 14 people at the UU. As we came around a year or two with vaccines and stuff, we started doubling up in the rooms at the University Lodge. We call it the University Motor Lodge. I think that was its old name, but I guess we like 3-letter acronyms. So UML, we call it. And though that's challenging sometimes because you're putting two different people who don't know each other, are like, don't touch my stuff, that kind of thing, or they touch my stuff, but beyond that, or the people just personalities don't click. But we've managed to have about between 33 and 36 people on any given day since then, with the doubling up. There's some people that you can't do it. And then about February of 2021, the same owner of the University Motor Lodge also owns that's Kurt Shumway. He also owns the Econo Lodge. And that was closed as well. The University Lodge was closed. That's why we were able to avail ourselves of it. So that was closed as well. And so we rented the entire first floor and we got 19 more rooms. So by the end of that season of 2021, we were housing 70 people, up from about 28 at the Baptist church to 70. So it was like remarkable. I mean, I've often said, probably my staff is tired of hearing it. I've often said that I'd give it all back if we could have 6.3 million lives back, but that's not possible. You know, we just passed the 1 millionth death in the United States, and it's, you know, it's just a tragedy. And of course, this thing is still on the move. The rates are rising all the time. I didn't put my mask on tonight because I don't think I can get it through the computer, but you never know. I'll test myself afterwards. But it really was amazing that we were able to capitalize on these opportunities. You know, the money that was available from the feds. That, you know, we were an organization when we were running the operation at the Baptist Church. We're roughly $300,000 and a staff of 16, and now we have about $2 million and a staff of 60. Now, our fear is, of course, this will all go away once the federal government forgets about people who are homeless. I'm being cynical, I'm sorry. But, you know, that's bound to happen. You know, once the attention shifts away from COVID, assuming COVID ever lets go of us, which it doesn't seem to be doing. The only good news is, I guess, that with vaccinations, the fatalities have seemed to be less, but they're still happening. People are still dying. I believe Mary Wentworth, someone told me, some of you know her from town meeting. I believe she passed away from COVID. Yeah. I heard that from one person, so I may be wrong, but yeah, I was really sorry to hear that. So going forward, well, the Hadley Econo Lodge was just till February. Sorry, starting in February and went till June. And then we gave it back. And but we kept the operation at the University Motor Lodge. We kept the Unitarians through the summer of 2021, and then in 2021 November we opened at the Lutheran Church, the Emmanuel Lutheran Church, which for those of you who live up that way, it might be your polling place. It's a beautiful open space in their parish hall. And their church is kind of built in 1973. It's over here, and the parish hall is over here, and there's a gorgeous courtyard in between, which was like, wow, you don't expect. You know, I mean, we've gone from the basement of a Baptist church to the Garden of Eden here. So, and they have a well-appointed kitchen, again, an older one, but very well-appointed. And the people at the Lutheran Church welcomed us with open arms. And it's so funny because in 2009, I was shopping around looking for churches, and I had gotten to the Lutheran Church and they gave us money, but they said, we've got a daycare center, we're not really ready to do that. And over time, things have evolved, and they got a new pastor. In fact, I had spoken to the pastor, Scott Nessel, and asked him, and I thought, oh, we have a deal here, I think. And he said, oh yeah, I would like you to come to my executive council to present to them. And I think for sure we would have been able to use that facility that year. And he said he was going to send me a Zoom link, and he never did. And I thought, well, what's going on here? He asked me to come to a meeting, and send me the Zoom link. And then the date comes and goes. I thought maybe the guy was in an accident or something. It turns out he died in his sleep at the age of 48. And so the rest of the congregation was reeling at that point. They had to hire a new pastor. And so fast forward till last summer, we approached them again, and the council was very receptive. And they had an interim pastor there, Stephanie Smith. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's a Lutheran pastor that runs what's called the Cathedral of the Night over in Northampton, where they set up tables on the streets of Northampton out in front of First Churches, and they serve meals and minister basically to. It's not a government funded program, similar to Manna. It's not a government. Manna is another wonderful program over there, headed up by Lee Anderson. I'm about to be attacked by a cat, I think. So you guys don't mind if I share the screen with her. I live near the common school, and the kids all refer to her as Vampire Kitty because she's always hunting. They don't even know her name is Izzy. So anyway, it's been a remarkable ride, I must say. And I am now 67 and ready for Social Security. So coincidentally, yesterday was my last day at Craig's door. So it's a new chapter for them and a new chapter for me. And as Dorothy Day says, no one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless because there's too much work to be done. So with that, I guess if you have questions, let me know. I see Andrea talking again, but she's very polite about muting.
Yeah. No, I'm thank you for that. I didn't realize that I knew you were, thinking about retirement. I didn't realize that you were actually going to retire. Yeah.
Well, that's a fungible term.
I'm not going to talk about retirement.
On to the next.
I think I need
next
another
adventure.
job so I can retire.
Yeah.
Because there is
But
too
anyway.
much to do.
Yeah, there is. And in fact, Dorothy Day is significant in that we modeled our program. There she is. That's Izzy, also known as Vampire Kitty. We modeled our programs on the Catholic worker movement, not from a religious perspective, but because they had that same philosophy of meeting people where they are, not questioning, not judging, and doing what needs to be done to get them inside. I don't know if I don't know if you're ever familiar with the Lower East Side, Mary House and Joseph's House, and Dorothy Day was I think she was an Episcopalian who converted to Catholicism, and she, along with Peter Moore and a couple of lefties, started the Catholic worker movement, and they used to sell those. They would give out sort of like what do they call it now? They give out newspapers to people who are homeless to sell, and they get to keep the proceeds. Well, the Catholic worker was a penny a copy, but they would give them out to people who were homeless and allow them to keep the proceeds as well. And they're all about service, and that's really what we are about too. What Craig's Doors is about: how to meet people where they are and help them get from point A to point B, whatever their point B is. It doesn't necessarily have to be our point B, because if we get hung up on that, there's an old saying, I guess, I don't know where I heard it first, but as someone who's a sort of quasi social worker, I'm responsible for the process, but not necessarily the outcome. Because if you get hooked into a positive outcome every time, you're going to be bitterly disappointed.
Yeah.
And you're going to have expectations for people that maybe they can't live up to. And then you feel maybe a little resentment. So the best thing to do is to keep your expectations at a minimum and make sure the process is fair and open and available to everybody. And from there, good things happen. And we've gotten a lot of people housed. Unfortunately, not one of them was housed in Amherst. They were housed in, basically housing authorities. And there's been some emergency housing vouchers, again, with COVID money that have become available. So, but often, people are getting, like we have one woman who she's lost her car and she's living in Ashfield, and there's no public transportation, and she's African American. I think maybe maybe the only African American in Ashfield, and that's a problem for her. But she's grateful for the opportunity to have a house. And I just saw her last week, and she's been there about better part of a year. And we took she was at the Econo Lodge and then moved back over to the University Lodge. It's the number of police calls that we have from the motels are significantly lower than the ones. It's not that we don't have any, but they're significantly lower than the ones at the congregate shelter, because when you're in a tight spot, where, of course, with COVID, we made sure there's 6 feet of distance between people, but you add a little alcohol or other drugs, and people can get a little testy with each other. Well, so we have to call police more often at congregate sites than we do at the hotels. Well, so I'm all for it.
Tell you that we're having an introduction thing on Sunday at Groff Park from 3 to 5. The League of Women Voters, in association with the Racial Justice Committee, to introduce our new director of CRESS, which is the Community Responding Program that helps the police, which will help that situation, as well as the new DEI director, who's coming for a short time. She's really not moved yet because she doesn't start till July 1st.
Yes, I saw her name in the paper.
Young. She's Nolan Young. She's from Notre Dame is where she created a program.
Wow.
But again, I have a lot of hope because that's one of the groups that I worry about a lot is in terms of the police, and they're busy with college students and all kinds of stuff. And so this could be a help for this population also to like pull back and say, okay, let's find out what the situation is and
Yes,
make
yes.
that a better place.
Yes, I've met with Earl since he's been here, and we were talking about a rise for social justice earlier, and Earl was the president of the board. I didn't know him because it was probably after the time I left Open Pantry in 2009, but I know if he was the president of the Arise for Social Justice board, I know his charism, put it that way.
Yeah.
And he's going to be, I'm expecting very good things will come of his tenure here and of that program. This said, I do have to put a plug in for the Amherst PD. They have never really been a problem for us. They are very respectful. We call them sparingly because we are inviting people with weapons into a situation that's a little bit tense. So we don't call needlessly or just at the drop of a hat. But anytime we've interacted with them, maybe a couple of minor misunderstandings along the year, because I've been here twice. I served as the executive director for Craig's Doors from 2012 until 2014. I went down to North Carolina to work with refugees for the U.S. Committee for Refugees, and then came back. And after there was another opening, and so in 2019 I did it again. So it's been on and off about 5 years, and I gotta say that the more than 5, because I was volunteering for CHD and Milestone Ministries, we really haven't had problems with the Amherst police. Now that doesn't mean that people in Amherst have not had problems with Amherst police.
That's right.
I'm just saying we have not.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that has anything to do with me, or I don't think so.
It has a lot to do with the place and
Yeah. I don't remember Linda Newcomb. She's retired now. She was a police officer, started out at Northeastern University and then became a police officer here for about 30 years and then retired. I think she still lives in the area. Literally, there was a guy who was one of my favorites named Mountain Man. The guy looked like Father Time with long hair, long beard, very tall. And he had one leg. And but he, he's gone now, so I think I can say this. Yes, wasn't he a nice guy? Chris, and
Chris, yeah.
Yes, and he sometimes when he would get a little too much to drink, he would get arrested, and because he had one leg, I guess they thought he was going to beat himself to death with his leg, so they removed it while he was in the cell. So one day Linda Newcomb comes in, with a black plastic trash bag. And I said, "What's that, Linda?" She said, "Oh, is Chris Lynch here?" I said, "Oh, you're kidding. You're bringing his leg?" I said, "You really are a full service police department, But she was that kind of police officer, a community police officer. And, there was a guy from Holyoke who stayed there, and she ended up bringing him coupon cards for Dunkin' Donuts and helping him out, it was just a great relationship. But yeah, so
you have a question.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Bonnie?
Oh, yeah, thanks. One of the things we've been trying to explore on the Racial Justice Committee is documentation and statistics. And I'm sure if you're getting federal money, you probably had to keep case histories and so on for the clients of the shelters. Do you have a sense of the sense of a breakdown, how many, what the percentages might be of people of color, or is that
there's
not...
less. There's less up here. When I worked in Springfield, there were a lot more people of color there. We do have maybe, I'd say like 15% the people of color, in any given season. And, but if you go system wide and region wide, there are 3 times more people of Latinx descent that are homeless, and 2.6 times more people who are Black. And that's not, it's not, it doesn't match the population. So yes, this is a very difficult problem, and getting people into housing, being homeless already is a mark against you, and then being homeless and being a person of color. is another problem, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is. We had some rapid rehousing dollars this year over the last 2 years, and there's no way to do it. You get on the phone, you talk to a landlord, you say, well, we'll pay for their rent for an entire year. Well, yeah, but we don't want to set them up for failure. And it's like, what are you telling me? They love that line. We don't want to set them up for failure. I think what it really means is we don't want to have to evict them in a year and have to pay all the court costs that are involved in that. We've had 4 new housing, at least 4, maybe 5 new housing developments in downtown Amherst. Not one of them has had permanent affordable housing as a part of it.
Isn't that
very sad?
Wait, isn't that part of the deal that they have?
They got around it somehow.
They get around it.
Back to the days of Jonathan
ways,
Tucker
there
and
are
those
very
folks.
much ways.
They somehow,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
The one East Pleasant and Kendrick Place and
There's no affordable housing in
none.
those places?
Now, luckily, the town of Amherst has just concluded or signed a deal with Keith Ferry of Wayfinders. And Keith is actually from Amherst, but Wayfinders is based in Springfield. And they're going to develop the East Street School, and that'll have some permanent affordable housing. I'm not sure of the number of units, but and then of course the one over on Northampton Road that the Amherst neighbors were upset about. That's going to have 10 units for people who are homeless. And then
What about the two? There's the new one on Spring Street. That's like, are those studio? Next to Grace Church.
Yeah, but that's not yet built, is it? I don't know what that.
It's half built. It's half built.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
and it comes half built. I thought you said half filled.
Half built, and it comes way out. Like there's no setback. It comes way out almost into the street.
That and parking. These guys that live in the kids that live in those units all get downtown parking passes.
And what about the
$25?
What about the one in North Amherst at what Cinda's thing, the mill? What's it called?
I think there might be 1 or 2 units there.
Oh, I can't believe this. That was the
believe
whole point.
Amherst is not a place.
And we have we do have a municipal housing trust. So it's not like it's not been set up, and that's been set up for quite a while.
Right.
I mean, the one that John
they
Hornick
have,
but and John's leaving too, unfortunately. That's what I heard anyway. I heard John's leaving too, so
John Hornick.
Retiring. Yeah, that's too bad. He's done a great job.
Yeah.
But just to go back to the Kendrick Place, for example, kids that work for us that are students are renting 1 room in a 4-bedroom unit and paying $1,100 for the room. Like how can anybody pay $4,400? Here on my street, right across the street from here, a house came on the market that had been empty for a while, and a woman bought that house and the house down at the end of the street.
Oh, that's Jeffrey Lane.
Jeffrey Lane, and
I have friends on Jeffrey Lane.
And it's $4,000 a month for that house across the street, and $3,500 for the one down the street. Right. Which means it can't be rented by anybody but students. You know what I mean? And nothing against students. I mean, we all we all were students at one point. So and there's not enough housing, so it's not their fault. But it's become a cottage industry, and there's no regulation at all, and there isn't enough staff involved in the town to keep up with the complaints. And everything is complaint driven, So this situation is getting worse and worse and worse.
Anybody else have a question that they'd like to ask? Because that's, they do certain things, and I forget some of them. I've been away from housing for a while, but the people who are building, they do certain extras for the town, and then they get a pass, and they don't have to have as many units. Oh yeah. It's really.
Yeah.
This is very anecdotal, but we're renting our house for a few months, and so I put it on off-campus housing, and the cost of the whole house. I got a reply from a student who said, "Is that cost for 1 room or for the whole house?" And we're like, "If you want to pay us $12,000 a month, to stay in our house. We might put up with the damage it might cause. But just that mentality of, I mean,
Right.
aren't people up to 2,000 for a room?
Right.
1,100 to 2,000 for a room.
Right. Right. So that's going to drive people who are poor or homeless out of here,
Sure.
Junior professors, UMass
Yeah.
and places can't live in there.
Right.
Right.
And also, who gets to live in those places who are students versus who lives in the dorms on campus? Then there's
Right.
going to be a big class
Right.
divide about
Right.
that too.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
It is a mess. Yeah.
Now, this is such a regional problem. It seems to
It
me that
is.
there's so badly, I mean, our response to it is not set up in a regional way. It seems like there ought to be a better way of really addressing it from a funding and support standpoint.
In my opinion, rent control would be what's in order here, but they're trying to try passing that in this town.
Oh, that was a blessing in New York.
Yes, exactly.
A
It
blessing
can work.
for a lot
It
of
can work.
people.
Yeah. And then, of course, people who get the rent control, then they sublet it on the DL.
Well, yeah, to some level. And then we had Michael Bloomberg, and they
Yeah,
let him
right.
have 3 terms, and
Yes.
he made New York City a place for wealthy people. And they've turned Brooklyn neighborhoods, people who have lived in some areas for 30, 40 years can no longer live there. It's really scary.
Yeah.
A lot of people I know had brownstones. They just got rid of them. They said, fine, take it. And they're in parts of Jersey that are more reasonable to live.
Right.
It's like,
My
I keep saying
daughter,
I'm going to New Jersey, not to
Yeah.
Brooklyn anymore, when I go
my
to
daughter
visit.
Maya, who had Barry Brooks as her, also as her guidance counselor. She was trying to decide where to go to school, and one of the options was Barnard, which she didn't go to in the end. And she said, well, what do you think then? I said, well, nobody can afford to live in that damn town except for students. People who are very rich and people who are extremely poor. So you might as well give it a shot. And she loves it. She's still there. She's now working for Planned Parenthood down there. And, yeah.
She lives in
Well, no, she was living in Harlem, but she moved over to
yeah, because
Astoria.
Harlem has come a long way in terms of that. The only thing is when we get certain people coming to make it better, so to speak, they price out the people in the neighborhood. And that's what's happening.
That's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem. She lived in Hamilton Heights for a couple of years.
Oh yeah,
and then moved to Astoria. I'd never had any experience. We're getting a little off track of homelessness, but Astoria, the tallest building seems to be like 4 stories. I had no idea there was a part of New York like that.
Oh yeah, Queens,
other than the Bronx and Queens, but way out in Queens, by the airport.
Yeah.
So this, Adrian. Go ahead, Adrian.
So I'd love to bring us back to the issue of housing and homelessness in Amherst. Kevin, first of all, Kevin, you and I go back a long time. I'm delighted. I'm delighted that you're back in Amherst. But let me pose the following question. Granted, the newer buildings, the high rises downtown, have not been participants in the inclusionary zoning that we passed in town meeting. My understanding, and this is where I need your help, is that the newer building that's going up under the same firm that built Kellogg Place, One East Pleasant, that it would, thank you, I forgot the name of it, but my understanding is that it would go beyond inclusionary zoning, that the hope that it was going to go over and above the number of units for low income and the 30, 50, 80%. Can you bring me up to date on
I'm not familiar. I know Nate Malloy did a great job with passing an inclusionary zoning.
My understanding, but bring us up to date on that. I'd appreciate it.
I'm sorry, I'm not as up to date. You're talking about the Spring Street place.
I'm talking about the building that is going to go up where the pub is.
No, I don't even know about that one. Sorry. It's been with COVID, it's been so hellish. I just anticipated it was going to be more of the same, but maybe there is going to be because of this inclusionary zoning.
Well,
maybe there is going to be
yeah.
more units.
May I follow up, Marcy,
Sure.
while I have the
Yeah.
floor?
Oh, go.
So, Kevin, there has been, I would say, a tug in this town between trying to get permanent housing versus transitional housing versus all the work you've poured your heart and soul into homelessness shelters over how many years. Can you bring us up to date on where we are in the permanent housing area?
Well, that's more of John Hornick, and he
Mhm.
he has managed to get a piece of property on Belchertown Road, and
Yes.
that the hope there is to do permanent housing. Ironically, that was what we started this agency to do, and then we
Yes,
got sort of sidetracked and
I
into
know.
the world of homelessness.
Mhm.
The
Yes.
Craig's Doors a Home Association. People ask me, what the hell does that mean? That was the original intent of this
Right.
organization, and we never were able to do it because those are long and involved. And Valley CDC does a great job. I don't know if you know Laura Baker over there,
Yes,
and
we do.
she does an excellent job of crunching the numbers and getting the financing. And but they take, any of those projects take years. Look how many meetings she had to go to.
Been decades, Kevin.
Yeah, it has been. It has been. So, even though we set out to do permanent affordable housing, I must say we get an F on that.
Yeah.
But we did keep a lot of people safe, and there's always been this tug between, especially with people in town, town government, and I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just saying that
We know who they are.
yeah. Well, it's just there's a suggestion, or there's sort of a belief somewhere that these are not our people. Well, I always say, well, when someone is picked up in a body bag on the streets of Amherst, and the medical examiner scans the barcode on their heel and says, "Oh, they must have been from Holyoke because clearly they're not Amherst." What does it matter? They're still dead on our streets. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And clearly, there's no barcode. But to me, having maybe it's because of my traveling around to Asia, Africa, Central America, and working with people who are displaced. I don't care where you're from. If you don't have a place to stay tonight and you're in our town, then we need to open the door for you. Unless you're going to be, unless you're going to start beating people up or producing a weapon, and most people don't do that. Very rarely do we ever see that kind of behavior. Then we need to house you. We need to provide that service to you, and make sure that you don't perish. It shouldn't be a death sentence to be a drug addict or an alcoholic, or just down on your luck and not able to afford a motel room. We're running into a little bit of that over in Hadley. Again, not to call anybody out, but we're getting calls from the building commissioner over there saying, well, what is the program and how long are they staying? And you know what these questions mean. Like, oh, that could be an R1 going to an R2, not allowed. And then you wonder, does it have something to do with the fact that the people who run that motel, it's a classic immigrant story, they're from India. Is this, I don't want to, again, this is being recorded. I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but it's a little frustrating, that these questions come up. It's a motel and we're putting people, and 2 people per room. We're putting 2 people per room. How are the people that we're putting into the rooms any different than any person who comes for a graduation or a conference or whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elizabeth Davis has a question.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
Adrian.
Good to see you, Adrian. Or not
Same
see
here.
you, but see your hand.
Same here, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was most interesting and inspiring to see what Craig's Doors has done over the years. I just have 2 questions. How long do the 70 residents who are at Craig's Doors, how long do they usually stay there? And I guess a more general question, is there any limit on the amount of time that they stay?
Yeah, no, we didn't put limits on it. We tried to move people out as fast as we can. It became easier more recently to get people into local housing authorities. So we've been sending people to Chicopee, to Northampton, to Ashfield, to Miller's Falls, to Turner's Falls, but nothing in Amherst. It's untouchable. So our problem is this: at what point do we say, it was nice having you, but you need to go? We have maybe with 1 or 2 cases where we know that people are younger and they've been working and they've been living with us. You know what I mean? for a longer period of time. Well, you should have saved some money, and we need to maybe move you out and make some room for some others. But that happens rarely, because most people, the majority of, the majority of people that we have, there's issues that led to their homelessness. So it's either mental health issues or substance abuse issues, or both. So it's hard for them to navigate. We also, I didn't mention this, but we also serve a population that's in the woods behind University Drive. We put a porta potty in the woods. We provide them with water. We take the trash out. And that's not even a shelter. That's just people living in the woods. It's mostly just summertime and springtime, but and fall. But our attitude is, especially with COVID, we need to keep people safe. And so that's why we do what we do. And we found a guy with a porta potty company that used to be homeless himself, and used to be, he's in recovery. He doesn't mind me telling you that. And his wife was in a shelter. So most people would tell you, oh no, we're not doing that. These guys are going to drink the hand sanitizer, so we're not going to do that. But this guy is a mensch, in my opinion. And of course, somebody calls us up from the property. Well, what are you doing with that thing in there? We saw a truck in there. It's like, well, what would you rather us do? Like, not clean it up? We did a cleanup with one of the fraternities recently, a couple of weeks ago, and we took out 30 tons of trash, because as people move through their time there, they there's this detritus that kind of builds up, and nobody cleans up. So we've done, this is the second time we got some money from the community foundation, when COVID first started, and we then cleaned it up one year, and then this year we did it again. And but that's another thing.
Is it possible to say the average amount of time that a resident Craigsville stays there?
Well, we've had some that have stayed there since we opened on November 1st in the motel. You know what I mean? But there's a gradual. Like maybe a third of the people that we've started with, the years that I've been here, and then sadly some die. It's one of the horrible parts of our job, is that you're not our next of kin, so we don't always hear. So there was one woman who just recently died in April, 40, not even 40, from an overdose, and we couldn't decide whether is she really dead or maybe she's in detox, and we were hoping, but it turns out she's not, and she did pass away. Another woman blew out her liver, and she was probably not yet 50. And one of the great things, there's a group called, I don't know if you know Jay Levy, who lives down in Amherst as well. He heads up a group called Elliott Community Health Services, and they work with people, they do street outreach with people who are mentally ill and living on the streets. And there's a guy that works with him, or for him, named Brendan Plant. And he's so good about it. He always hosts a memorial service for someone when they die. So because, they're part of our community, and in our case, part of our family, because we've been working with them for so many years or months. And, but it's, I think one time when I was working in a soup kitchen in Yonkers, when I first came back to this country, I went to a substance abuse training. I was actually, the job I had at the time was substance abuse counselor, and I knew nothing about substance abuse counseling. I spoke Spanish, and they said, "Oh, we've been trying to fill this position. You'll do." And the first person that came to meet with me said, "Well, what meeting do you go to?" And I said, "Well, I don't go to meetings." "What do you mean you don't go to meetings?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a drug addict." And the guy said to me, "What the F can you tell me?" And he stormed out of my cubicle, and we got to be good friends later. Unfortunately, he died with a spike in his arm on the top of a rooftop in Yonkers. But it's so sad. And so this substance abuse counseling session that I went to, the guy who was giving it, Terry Gorski, said that when one of the people that you serve dies, you make sure you go to their funeral, because you need to see the totality of that person. You need to know how they were connected to their family and what is left behind. And so we do that. We do that as often as we can. Even if there's only 2 or 3 other people there with us, we'll still do it.
Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you to Brendan for initiating that. And now with the new pastor at the Lutheran Church, he's opened up his doors, not just to the shelter, but to that. We use his sanctuary now if there's somebody who passes away in the Amherst area. So,
Oh, this is wonderful.
Yeah, he's, it's so funny because this summer he wasn't yet named. And we thought, oh my God, this poor guy, or per person, we didn't know if it was a man or a woman. What are they going to think when they get to Amherst for their new church? And there's, oh, Noonan in this shelter is going to be in your parish hall. But you couldn't have asked. Jeffrey Schultz is his name. He's a new guy in town, and he's just fantastic.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about him.
Mhm.
He really takes it on as a ministry.
Marcy, did you have?
Yeah, I have two questions. One, so when you have these folks in the hotels, are you paying market rate? Like,
Well, it's being recorded. Maybe some people think this is outrageous, but to me, it's a deal because with two people in a room, we're paying like $500 a piece, and so we have 20 rooms, we pay 20 grand a month, and it's sort of the market
500 a
rate
piece for
for the shared room,
per
per
week,
person. No, per month.
per month,
Oh,
500. Okay,
Unlike the guy that was living at Kendrick Place, who's paying $1,100 a month
right.
for one bedroom, we're able to put two people in and have it be $500 a month. And,
Okay.
and we're grateful to do that. It sounds like a big number, and it sounds, oh
Yeah,
my God,
yeah.
how can they get away with? But where else can Amherst? So essentially, what we created at the and it wasn't intentional, but what we created at the University Lodge was permanent supportive housing. Sorry,
Mhm.
transitional supportive housing. You know what I mean? So that
Yeah.
people have a home in town, in the center of town. We went around knocking on the doors of all the surrounding neighbors to let them know. Jerry Weiss and I, we gave them our card, let them know any problems, call us up.
Mhm.
Not one complaint in 2
Mm.
years. And also, one neighboring family came over at Christmas saying, "How can we and our children help volunteer?" Well, there's not a lot to do in a motel. I mean, like maybe you can hand out Christmas presents. So, but other than that, there's really a lot to do. I mean, the agency that people have when they have their own room is
Mhm.
just remarkable. I mean, and some of the people, we have one woman that's living there who she didn't do so well the first time, like November of 2020. She lasted maybe a week, but she's come back, and she's been there about a year. And she said to us when she first came, she hadn't slept in a bed in 5 years.
Mm.
That's incredible. She's been camping out, and she would, in between her stays at the University Lodge, she would hit me up for another tent or one. My favorite one was a bell. She needed a bell so that she could scare away the bears,
Mhm.
because she was hanging out somewhere near Staples,
Mhm. Mhm.
near the U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, yeah.
And the bears, they're all over the place, and so
Wow.
she needed to scare the bear away. And I thought, you know what, we're a full service agency when we're starting to buy cowbells to scare away the bears.
Mhm.
So my second question is just like maybe too personal, but do you have any plans in your retirement?
Well, we're going August. We're going to go to back
Germany.
to Germany to
Yeah.
see my mother-in-law and father-in-law. And my father-in-law is 77 this year, so I'm a little closer in age to my in-laws than I am to my wife. But she's wonderful. She just came in. She was looking at me like, "What are you doing? Who are you talking to?" Just got home. I don't know. I'm looking for, I always love things that involve learning about other cultures. So
Mm.
that would be high on my list. My daughter, the one that's in New York, has gotten engaged to a guy that she met in Chile who happens to be from Pakistan. So that's in the cards for next year. That I have to get to the mosque in Pakistan, and maybe they'll also get married at New York City Hall. I don't know. But he's a wonderful guy who did a program she's at NYU. She's graduating May 25th.
Mm.
Master's in Public Administration with a focus on health. And he did a master's in public administration and focus on agriculture. And he wants to start a nonprofit. So it looks like Lahore is in her future in terms of her but it's a nice town. It's just that it's really hot, and and the air quality is not so great. But
Yeah.
he was just over there for the wedding of her future brother-in-law, and the pictures that she sent back were wonderful. And now she's in Singapore because her mom's from Singapore. and she's there for the 92nd birthday of her grandfather. So
Mm,
those pictures were also great. So we have kind of an international family, and so it
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprising for us to go somewhere. But Marion, my wife, Marion Hone, is still working here in Springfield. So the dog just showed up to be part of the game here.
well,
And, I love
yeah.
Zoom. You just have all kinds of animals
Right.
crawling around.
Yeah. I have so many questions about like individuals that I used to know when I worked at the Survival Center. And I bet we
Yeah.
have a lot of people in
Oh,
common,
I'm sure we do.
but I
Yes.
don't think that's really appropriate to do that right now. But
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming. This is really.
Oh yeah, it's been.
amazing.
I wonder
Thank
what
you.
the hell would we fill an hour and a half with?
No,
Apparently
well,
the time
we
is
don't
flown.
always make an hour and a half, but we give the time just in case,
That's
But
good.
before we
Good.
end up going or getting the last questions, I just want to remind everybody, don't close when we leave. Wait until you get the survey afterwards. It really does help us an awful lot with the League of Women Voters, whose big push this year, both on the state level and the national level, is DEI, as well as the many things that the League does. So please help us with that. When you go to leave, there'll be a survey that will come up. Answer the survey, and then you can leave. And we're very, very grateful.
And
Anyway,
I'm in a
Martha,
privileged position. I don't have to fill out a survey. Since
Yes, you do.
I'd probably say the guy was lousy. You could do better next week.
Martha, you have a
Is
question?
there one more question there? I see a hand up there.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that you've been invited to come on Sunday afternoon to our community reception to.
I would,
our-
but my daughter is returning from Singapore on Saturday,
Ah,
and so I am
okay.
heading down there to see.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, first I'm going to the Woo Sox because my sister-in-law is turning 70, and the Worcester Red Sox has made baseball affordable because who the hell can afford to go to the Red Sox anymore? But the Worcester Red Sox, there's much more affordable. So that's where I'll be the first part of the day, and then I'm heading to New York to see my daughter.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yes, well, thank you
But
very much.
Earl's a fine choice, and there's another cat.
Yes. Yes.
Earl's a fine choice, and I'm expecting good things as he ramps up his staff.
And we're
And
looking forward to
we are going to be
Pamela,
partnering.
also the DEI director. So I'm
Right.
looking forward to.
Oh yes, I
seeing
don't
her.
know Pamela, but I was really impressed by her.
Yeah, her
credentials.
credentials, yeah.
Yes.
She's going to be there for a little while, from maybe 3 to 4. So.
And our intent is to partner with the CREST program as
Mhm.
Craig's Door. So I won't be there to do it, but that's what we want to do because we value
Yes.
that kind of
Absolutely.
interaction. There's no need to bring armed people into a emotionally and alcohol charged event when we can have somebody come that can talk people down. You know what I mean? Without that. Again, I don't want to criticize the Amherst PD. I'm not trying to be politic. They really have been good to us in our program and the people that we serve. I know others in town have had different experiences, and I feel bad about that. Certainly, what we saw in Buffalo it just breaks our heart. I think we've come out of the woods, and we just
I know.
all
I
in
know
your
it's
face
it's
all over
unreal.
again.
It's
Yeah.
unreal.
Yeah, it is unreal. I mean, to have planned that to go. I think the kid was in Binghamton and drove 200 miles to get and scoped it out. Oh my God, what have we come to?
Yeah.
It's horrible. I didn't mean to end on such a
No, that's all right. But we
But
did
it's-
mention, that for that as well as for Sunday. Like, let's just show the world and other people that Amherst is trying to move, and I think we're doing the right things, and
right.
it gives me hope. It really does.
I
I
agree
just
with
would
you.
like as many people to participate as possible, but definitely there's
And
hope.
the Lutheran Church just hired a new secretary, and you won't believe this, but her name is Angela Battle. And I keep calling her Andrea every time I walk in the door. Oh, hi, Andrea. How are you?
I have to
Angela
find her.
Battle.
She lives in Ware. Yeah. But, so we'll have to get you two together, maybe.
Yeah,
or
I'm telling you, I
somehow.
think I've heard of her name before, though.
I've never
Somebody
met her
else said
before,
that to
but,
me too.
yeah,
I said, no,
yeah.
we're not really related. It's the first name there. The first name
Well,
is different.
actually, I think she worked as the secretary for Grace Church before.
I've heard her name before.
Just before Tom Sinan got there, or just at the same time that Tom Sinan got there.
Okay.
And
If
yeah.
anybody else has questions, speak now. Lift your little hand up. Okay. All right. So again,
Thank
do
you for
not
the
leave
invitation.
totally until you fill out the survey. It's very short, won't take but a few minutes. But
All right.
you know, Kathy and Kathy Campbell and Sunil, we really want those things filled out so that people can tell us what they think about what's going on and just give us good information. And
Great,
Kevin Noonan,
great.
thank you so much. And
It's
and
indeed
thank
an
you
honor
for
to
your
have spent time
service
with
to
you.
this
I feel like
community
Alistair
as well.
Cook with his wingback chair here.
Yeah. Yes. And do you know who is going to be taking over your position?
Not yet, no.
Not
Jerry
yet.
Jerry Weiss is standing in for now, and
Okay.
so the
So
board
we'll have to
will
find out.
figure that out. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right then.
Again, thank you, everyone.
you. Yes.
Appreciate it. We appreciate you, Kevin, very much, and thank you for
Thank
all
you,
your service.
Andrea. I'm glad I
And,
didn't call you Angela just now. Thank you, Andrea.
That I
And
don't-
my best to Barry Brooks. I'm
Yeah.
a big fan. I'm a big
Yeah.
fan. And I
Yeah.
was of Judy's too. So thank you very much.
Yes, I know. Me too. I was her student, basically.
Were you?
The
Oh,
town,
wow.
no, in the town.
Oh, the
As
town.
you know, how to function in Amherst. That's how I ended up in the housing community. I'd
Good for
been
you,
here for
good for
a
you.
month and a half.
Good
So,
for you. All right.
anyway, all
Well,
right. Well,
thank you
thank
all.
you,
It's
everyone. Again,
pleasure
fill
to
out
be
your
with you.
surveys, and if you're available, please come Sunday 3 to 5 at Gruff Park.